He's not a bat, he's a man who fights crime. And we're gonna watch him fight for a minute at a time. With John and Niall and a guest who doesn't rhyme. It's Bat Minutes!
Hello, and welcome to what? Ooh, I was going to say another week. I forgot this is the Wednesday episode. Oh, damn it. Hello, and welcome once again to Bat Minute Forever, the podcast where we're cracked over the skull quite violently with each minute of Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever, 1 minute at a time. I am one of the hosts, Niall McGowan.
And I am your other host, John Parker. I am full of so many treats, I'm going to vomit knowledge all down your ear holes.
Don't believe it, folks. It's a trick. It's a trick. And today we have a different guest than we had in the previous episodes, because we like to mix things up sometimes. We have all the way from currently in Sydney, Australia, we have author, journalist, podcast host, Maria Lewis.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Well, welcome.
We're an international show. How many Australians is this now? 3, 4?
I think it'll be...
Who are the other Australians? We all know each other, so...
Oh, yeah. It's a very small country, I understand. So.
Have you had any Kiwis? Because I'm technically half Aussie, half Kiwi, so you're getting like 2 for 1 here.
I don't think we had any Kiwis. We had... Well, one of our regulars is Dale Kingsmill. I think she lives in Wollongong, I think you call the...
Wollongong, yep.
Yeah.
The gong, as they call it.
Then we have Beck Hill, who is Australian, but she lives in the UK.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, and then we had the guys who did Four Finger Discount, the Australian Simpsons podcast. They were on way. I think that's all the Australians.
Oh, no, we had Connor.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I forgot he was Australian, too.
We're basically an Aussie show at this point.
Well, yeah, that's very, like, UK colonial of you guys getting the Aussies in after sending off to a prison island,
Are we taking over, or are you getting your revenge? That's what we need to find out.
I'm very petty, so I'm all about the revenge, frankly.
Yeah. See, well, I'm not. So I'm actually Irish, so I'm like, well, maybe I'm secretly on your side the whole time, Maria. I was like, oh yeah, I'm working from the inside.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you might Ned Kelly's long lost relative or something. Oh man, I tell you, this Batman Forever, earnestly one of my favorite Batman movies. So I am super chuffed. And in particular, like when it gets, like I love Chase Meridian and that interaction with Bruce Wayne. It's so dumb and so fascinating and so funny to watch. She's so horny. I just love that she's horny on Maine the entire movie. She's like, I'm a professional, but also come to my apartment at midnight. I'm just casually naked. Like I really respect that. And so I was very excited to do any minute that involves the two of them, to be honest.
Oh. That's great to hear, because I always, for years, I thought, I don't really like her. She's just one note. But doing it minute by minute, it actually makes me like her a lot more because, as you say, she's a professional. It's presenting her in a very different light. She's a pro. She's got this job to do, but she's got time to be horny. That's great.
Yeah, and I mean, who doesn't, really? But also, it's a lot of shades of Harley Quinn as well. Like, around this time, Harley Quinn's popped up on the Batman animated series, and they didn't do that character. Like, you can't really do it in this kind of structure of the story they're telling with Two-Face and Riddler and Robin and, En Vogue and, like, however many, like, different elements. But that idea of, like, the psychologist being obsessed with the subject and then falling in love with him, it's got a lot of shades of Harley Quinn in there. Yeah, and at this point, you really only have, like, for the female leads, you have Vicky Vale, who I was never a fan of. I don't actually like the original Tim Burton Batman movie, but especially Vicky Vale I was not into. But Batman Returns, you have Michelle Pfeiffer, who's iconic, absolutely iconic in that role as Catwoman. And so you get Chase Meridian now, and so it's like, for me, she's not as bad as Vicky Vale, but she's not iconic like Catwoman. She's sort of somewhere in the middle, and you know, those are two pretty like significant roles to come up against. So she's holding her own.
Well, I don't know if you know, Maria, but because I also have like a few random, like to bring up occasionally, just random notes about Nicole Kidman. One of them's tied into that kind of concept. I don't know if you're aware, but like apparently very early in production, Joel Schumacher wanted to use Poison Ivy in this movie, and he specifically wanted Nicole Kidman to play that part. And then when it became like, oh, we got too many cooks in the kitchen here, he took like, I'll put Poison Ivy on the back burner, but he still wanted Nicole Kidman in, so he gave her like he just wrote like Chase Meridian became her part basically. But
and kind of a lucky miss for her too, because I mean, I don't know how she would have played it, but it's how do you just even looking at the dialogue that Uma Thurman has on the page, like, okay, yes, she goes ham. It's like, here, then, come hither. Like, it's very OTT, very 60s Batman, which is very fun and enjoyable. Now watching it back, and I really loved it at the time because I was a kid, but I don't know. Nicole Kidman's, she's good at doing kitsch. Like, I think Stepford Wives, even Practical Magic. Like, when she has a role, like, she's obviously better known for a lot of her more serious work. But when she has characters that have fun and humor loaded into them and into the arc of the character, she's really refreshing and enjoying to watch. But I don't know how, I don't know about her as Poison Ivy. I mean, I don't know how I feel about Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy. So, yeah, That's interesting. I don't know. I don't know about that. I'm not sure. And this is like a weird fact, but a good friend of mine who her name's Lexi Alexander. She went on to direct Green Street Hooligans and Punisher Warzone, but she was actually in the Batman and Robin movie. She was hired. She was a stunt woman at the time, but she was hired as one of the Poison Ivy hench people, like in the bit where they have like the greenhouse and they all have the like the whips and stuff. Yeah. And she was the only woman, and then they ended up she got fired off the job or like shuffled off to the side and replaced her with a guy, and so they had like a different type, but they had to do all this, they had to learn all how to use these specific types of whips that were designed to sort of look like a vine. And then they eventually didn't have those people in the movie at all. They just cut the whole scene. So it's crazy. Man. I was like, oh my God, you're in a Schumacher Batman? That's amazing.
That is awesome. Even if it's not in the movie in the end, or you're shuffled off, who cares?
Dude, if you'd just done the catering on it, I'd be like, that's incredible. Tell me more.
Crazy. Although, also thinking as well, looking into it, apparently, like, not only did, like, Nicole Kidman kind of not lose the role of Poison Ivy to Uma Thurman, but, like, you know, circumstances dictated that Uma Thurman ended up taking that part. But apparently Nicole Kidman was also locked in to play Ula in the 2005 version of The Producers, and eventually that role also went to Uma Thurman. Then Nicole Kidman was in consideration for roles in Lars von Trier's Nymphomaniac Volume 1 and the movie Bellamy. And both those parts went, in the end, to Uma Thurman.
That's so weird to me, because I don't see them as like similar in their acting or anything.
Yeah.
No, it's really only physicality. Tall, strawberry blondes, like they have a certain intensity to it. But yeah, I don't know. That's really interesting. You know, there was a really good episode of the Bill Simmons podcast where they had Matt Damon on, and they do this big sort of like him talking about, you know, his career and going to Harvard and living in like a share house with Ben Affleck and Casey Affleck, and Ben Affleck just being terrible at relationships even at 20. And there was this part where he was talking about how it was like the same group of people just constantly coming up for the same roles, and there being this sort of like history, this pop culture history of what ifs, and it was like always him and Edward Norton.
Really?
Like, if he didn't get a role, it would go to Edward Norton. And if Edward Norton didn't get a role, it would go to Matt Damon. So it's really funny how there's those people that sort of like cross over and intersect in such interesting ways.
I would never associate Ed Norton and Matt Damon as being the same type.
Young Ed Norton, you know, like this is around the era of like Rounders, Good Will Hunting, Primal Fear, School Ties.
Was it Rounders or was it Hard 8 that they were they were in a movie together. You think maybe the casting agents were
Rounders.
getting the things mixed up, and they're like, "Oh, the guys from freaking Rounders." Yeah, it's like, no, you want Ed Norton, you got Matt Damon. Like, oh crap, oh, it's too late now.
Well, he said that was like the culmination of they kept being on the same like shortlist together, and they were finally in a movie together. I'm like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Friendship for them.
I just got the images though of like Keith Urban arriving home and finding like Nicole standing over the fire with a glass of wine, just staring into the flames, and he's just like, "It's Thurman again, isn't it?" She's Thurman. Thurman! I'll curse that name.
Thurman, or she's just like working that boxing bag and full hair and makeup like Chase Meridian, casually in the middle of the day.
Just with Uma's face sellotaped on.
Yeah, exactly.
Thurman!
Although another weird one is that Joel Schumacher almost worked with Nicole Kidman previously because find that with Joel Schumacher, he's a guy who meets people in like the mid '80s, and then he's just like, put them in my pocket, and then later on he'll cast them like 5, 6, 10 years later.
He's got a little black book.
Pretty much, yeah. But apparently, when he was making Flatliners, he was like doggedly pursuing Julia Roberts for that movie. And at that point, Julia Roberts wasn't Julia Roberts. Like, she was only kind of up and coming. But
she'd really only done Mystic Pizza and a few other bits and bobs. Like, Flatliners was sort of right at that perfect time.
Yeah. And so apparently, though, he was pursuing her. And then Tom Cruise, who was also the producer on Days of Thunder, he was like, no, I want Julia Roberts. And he was kind of like, almost kind of cloistering her a little bit. Like, no, she's on the table with us. You can't have her. And so then Joel went and sort of like met with, like, a fresh off the boat, just straight after Dead Calm, Nicole Kidman. And he's like, oh, she's excellent. I think, yeah, maybe she'll get this part. But apparently then over on the set of Days of Thunder, Julia Roberts was reading the Flatliner script, and she's like, oh, I'm gonna do this instead. So she jumped ship, went over and did Flatliners, and then Tom Cruise and the Days of Thunder people were like, okay, I guess we'll have Nicole Kidman then. And then through that, of course, Nicole Kidman meets Tom Cruise, and then they become like the biggest power couple of Hollywood for like 10 plus years or whatever.
Fate.
So it's like, you could blame Joel Schumacher for hooking up Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman kind of accidentally.
I'm sure she does blame him. That's interesting. I think I probably would have preferred Nicole Kidman in the Julia Roberts part in Flatliners. Like, that's a much funner role. And it's kind of funny, Days of Thunder, the type of character she plays, truly not really that dissimilar to Chase Meridian. Like, I'm a professional. My mind's on the job. Oh, hello, hot guy. She's just like, professional and horny. That's professional. That's her deal for like 6 or 7 films there.
Yeah, so even like To Die For is just like, well, very, very professional and career oriented, but then like she'll use that sexuality to get whatever the hell she wants at the same time.
Oh, yeah, I love a sociopath trying to like, level the playing field. I love that. Live that.
Yeah.
I think it's important for these characters to exist because, you can be professional and stuff, but you still have a sex life. That's cool. You can have both. And this character embodies that. Look, it doesn't portray her as someone to be looked down upon or anything.
No.
And she's aspirational too. Like, she's aiming her sights high. Like, she's not trying to hook up with Two-Face or like Sugar and Spice or even the Riddler. She's like, I'm going for the biggest bat in town. I'm going for that BDE, and that's what I'm chasing.
But at the end, then she's just like, all right, I won't go for Batman. I guess I'll settle for this billionaire then.
Tough, this billionaire orphan. Ugh, God, this town's
consolation
packed full of billionaire
prize.
orphans. Yeah.
It is kind of weird though that like within this minute here at the beginning, because the minute opens with her just like Bruce has confessed all his repressed memories have come flooding out now, and then Chase Meridian's just like, oh, that's so hot, and then just pulls him in for this really epic kiss and stuff.
It is really interesting because I think we all have that friend who is attracted to damaged men, women, however you identify. And that is immediately, like, that's their magnet thing. It's that person who's broken or hurt or, like, they want to fix him. It's like that Bill Hicks thing, like, I can fix him. And we're, like, 20 other people at that moment with Bruce Wayne who would have been just like, F this, I'm out. Like, nah, too much baggage and a turtleneck. I can't deal with it. Whereas she is at the absolute opposite. She's like, oh, yeah, tell me more. give me more damaged stories. Like, she's never been more hot for Bruce in that moment than when he's like sharing his emotions and trauma with her, which I love.
Well, he's trying to, isn't he? But, he, in some ways, he's still a typical man. He's struggling to talk about his emotions.
Yeah.
Maybe she likes that he's even attempting it, though.
Oh, I was good.
Yeah, maybe.
I always get like mental images though, like any other patients Chase Meridian has, like with someone lying on the couch just talking about like, oh, I think I'm a kleptomaniac because like I have abandonment issues and like my mother left when I was very young and stuff. And Chase just behind them going like, oh yes, oh god, yes. It's like, oh, I know I shouldn't, but I want to.
Well, in one way, then, is her profession the right one for her to be in? In some ways, yes. In some ways, no.
I think she's in the right field. Like, obviously, psychology is her area of interest and expertise. The thing she's passionate about. But like, criminal psychology is like the Clarice Starling. Give me the Chase Meridian Silence of the Lambs movie. Like, that's the area she's got to be in more, and instead of this, like, high-end f***ing corporate psychology, get her in there with the criminal profiles. I mean, they kind of hinted that a little bit. Like, she's standing outside the skyscraper at the very beginning of the movie, and they're, like, looking up, and they're like, what can you tell us, Chase? And she's like, well, he's a demented man. He's, like, two halves, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, she's on the street, It's, like, very OTT. She's there for like for an info dump, which is fine. Somebody's got to do it at certain points, but yeah, just the idea of like anything like super traumatic or criminal, I think is totally her jam. And criminal psychology, her finding her own metaphorical Hannibal Lecters is just where I see her being her happiest.
Oh, now I want a Chase Meridian comic book at least. I would say a movie,
Wouldn't that
but
be
it's not
great?
going to happen. A comic book that's like that, like a Silence of the Lambs type thing.
Yeah, like a DC Comics one shot. And you know what's cool is you could do the Silence of Lambs, instead of it being like a Hannibal Lecter type, it could be somebody from within the Rogues Gallery, like a really demented calendar man or some kind of either prominent or like E-grade Batman villain, and doing like a really sort of dark, demented take on it. Really grounded, but like a really good murder mystery. That would be cool.
That would work as well, because DC have been doing lately a Lois Lane series.
Yes, which is amazing.
It's very serious, isn't it? And political and things. They could do that kind of a thing, but make it, like Clarice Starling.
Yeah. They kind of did the, they had the Harleen comic recently, which was like a really serious, like, in-depth breakdown of Harleen Quinzel's mentality as she got into the Joker and stuff. Like so there is, of course now, comics are in a kind of crisis mode in the current climate, but like there is a market for like Chase Meridian as Clarice Starling with like Kite Man or something like Chase Meridian meets Gentleman Ghost. Here it is, the movie you've all wanted.
Gentleman Ghost. Oh my god, we'll pick something better than that. It's like Chase Meridian versus Catman or something,
It's the crazy quilt. Goes into like, instead of like all the Hannibal Lecter drawings on the wall, he's just got like loads of quilts up around the cell.
Yeah, that's it. That's what he's into. Whatever it takes.
But that's the thing, actually, Maria. Like we mentioned earlier in the episode, we do have like one of our regular guests is Australian, and because Nicole Kidman is herself Australian, one of our questions was like, oh, what's the perception of Nicole Kidman like in Australia? Kind of assuming like, well, she must be like beloved over there and whatnot. And Dale came out like, I was quite shocked. She's like, oh yeah, not really. Like she's got a bit of that. I think she referred to it as tall poppy syndrome.
Tall poppy, yeah. I was just about to say that. It's a really thing because Australians are just generally. But essentially, it's we like you until you're successful, and then we hate you. That's generally, and it's the same sort of thing. Russell Crowe is interesting because he's like me. He was like came up from New Zealand and then spent a lot of time in me and Russell Crowe, so slimmer, hang out with the Wu-Tang Clan, like whatevs. No,
all the time.
Raised in New Zealand, and then kind of spent later to adult years in Australia, and you become better known for your work when you're living and working in Australia. But there's like Hugh Jackman's another example. Like there's Steve Irwin was like that. It's just an endless amount of Australian celebrities where it's like they like you until you become successful. Rebel Wilson's kind of like that as well. And then the minute you're perceived as being too successful, there's some some kind of like internalized hate, and Australia starts to turn on you real quick. And Nicole, that kind of happened like, I want to actually sort of around the time this movie came out. Like she was doing well there. It's always like our Nick. Like when they like you, you're always our Rebel, our Hugh, our Nick, our Rusty, our whatever. And then when they don't like you anymore, they're either referring to you as your full name, or it's like American citizen Mel Gibson.
Oh.
You know, like he was good old Australian boy until he went on a fucking anti-Semitic racist tirade and then went to court for domestic violence, and had a real great run there of about 12 years of just doing absolutely heinous shit. And then all of a sudden, that was the first time you started hearing about how he's actually American in the Australian press.
I don't blame you over there. Let me tell you, distance from him.
No take backsies, except in the case of Mel Gibson. But it is interesting with Nicole Kidman. Like for listeners who are like, who the f- are you? My background, I started as a police reporter when I was 16 at my local newspaper, and covered that round for many years before I was able to sort of like leverage my experience and start working as the local film writer for this newspaper. It was like it's a property within News Limited, and then moved up into a city newspaper. And so I've been a journalist for 16 years. I now primarily work in film, television, books, that kind of stuff. But my background was as an entertainment journalist. And so you do end up interviewing people like Nicole especially, and her best friend Naomi Watts quite a lot, because they are on the scene a lot. And Nicole, unlike somebody like Mel Gibson, even when he got super successful, he was like not coming back to Australia. He was like, yeah, I'm a success, Australia. Whereas Nicole and Naomi and Russell especially as well, they have always kept, and Kate Blanchett have always kept a foot in Australia, whether that's through like local theatre initiatives or things that they fund through the Sydney Theatre Company or any kind of like local production. Nicole did this movie Strangeland just a few years back with a really exciting female director who was like on the come up. And so they choose interesting projects and interesting ways to support the local industry. And I have a lot of time for Nicole Kidman. I think she's very smart, way smarter than people give her credit for. And I think she's legitimately like one of the great actresses of her generation. I think she's incredibly, incredibly talented. And I also think she's incredibly skilled at selecting roles. Like even the things that people perceive as flops, like say Stepford Wives, for instance, was perceived as a flop, but that has really come around as like this cult movie that people love. And it's sort of being this weirdly like very of the time remake, and very clever and very witty, even like, you know, like Days of Thunder and things like that. BMX Bandits, which was like her first big break with the big Days of Thunder hair. Yeah, but like dead calm, and like even the weird choices she makes, Dogville and Birth, and you know the others. She's just very very clever, I think, at picking roles that challenge her, but also working with filmmakers that are really different from people that she's worked with before. Like, you know how you have those directors and those directing acting duos, like I guess like a Tom Cruise and Chris McQuarrie or whatever. Like those people who work together over and over again. And Nicole Kidman isn't necessarily like that. You know, she like does something with Aquaman, which I think is like such a weird choice on paper for her. Like she hasn't really done a blockbuster like that since Batman. But then she does something like Lion, you know, and then she does something like Destroyer with, you know, Karen Kusama, who we absolutely love, like The Beguile with Sofia Coppola. Like this, just she's got a really great track record of working with lots of interesting female directors and just lots of people who really have a vision in a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect.
No, I think she's fantastic. And something that I find interesting about her, you know, coming off what you said there, is that she doesn't go for the obvious choices. Like she could be in every well, maybe not now, but she could have been at least in every blockbuster under the sun.
Aquaman was $1 billion movie. You know, that was only only like November 2018. It wasn't that long ago.
But she could have been in everything going, every movie coming out, every big summer movie. Oh, she could have been in it. It would have been fine. But she didn't go that route. And I respect that. I find that very interesting.
Even to see things like, you know, someone pitched you like several years back, they're like, they're going to make a movie, a modern movie about Paddington Bear, and you'd be like, oh god, that's gonna be terrible. And then like Nicole Kidman's in it. What the hell's going on? And then you actually watch the movie. It's like, this is brilliant. Like, oh, she obviously saw the potential. That was just like, yeah, this is good. I'm signing up for this. And you're like, not necessarily on paper, it sounds terrible.
No, totally. And even the blockbusters that she does choose are very interesting. Like, if we're going, let's just say from Batman Forever on, right? So you have like your big sort of sweeping period melodramas, things like Cold Mountain. Even The Beguiled is sort of like that. Practical Magic's fun, but like Eyes Wide Shut, that's a f***ing loose unit. That snaps up 4 years of your life working on that movie. But Moulin Rouge, you know, Baz Luhrmann is not necessarily Baz Luhrmann that he is now, but that's a huge deal, that movie. But the blockbusters that she does choose, even things like Happy Feet or The Invasion, Golden Compass, which actually I think Golden Compass, not as good as the TV series, but does quite, you know, does hold up. And things like Stoker and fucking Rabbit Hole. Oh man, she's so good in Rabbit Hole. Like, she's responsible for Miles Teller's career because she saw him performing at like a uni play, or college, sorry, they call it college in the US, performing like in a college production of some play that one of the students had written, and was like, that's the guy we need for Rabbit Hole. And that was really his first thing. She's just got a real eye, I think, for picking parts and picking filmmakers that are unexpected, in a way that I really admire. Like her track record, you start rolling back through that and there are so few misses, and that's so impressive when you've been working since like early 1980s. I think 1983 or 1984 is her first thing.
Yeah. But yeah, well, I think that's nice to get some like really nice appreciation for Nicole Kidman now, because like I think after this scene, Chase Meridian just becomes like, oh yeah, she's like the damsel in distress now. So then
you need one of those chicks. It's so funny. I was just watching The Saint today, with obviously Val Kilmer, and you know, one of the movies that he said no to doing Batman and Robin because he wanted to go off and do The Saint and whatever. And there is like Elizabeth Shue's character is very Chase Meridian in a lot of ways. And I found it so interesting because I was like, man, he basically went from Batman Forever almost straight into something like The Saint, which for all intents and purposes is a superhero movie, but also has these very poorly written female characters where it's their job to like, you're told they're smart over and over again, but you're shown them doing dumb shit for the entire duration of the movie. And that whole thing of like show rather than tell, and they're like, she's smart, she's a doctor, she's a scientist, she's this, and then it's like they're actively showing you them doing stupid shit. And you're like, god damn it, like you can have a female character like share that sort of spotlight with the male lead without them having to be inherently in need of rescuing every 5 minutes. But that's just me, I guess.
Yeah, well, fair enough, yeah. But that's the thing within the minute here. We then, you know, after this long passionate kiss and
get them lips.
That's the Elliot Goldball's score is again.
Get them Val Kilmer lips. Oh man, what lips?
Well, I'm sorry to go off topic here, Niall. You were on something, but I bring this up a lot. Batman is all about the lips. You got to get someone with the right lips. Val's got them.
As I recall, you and because you wrote quite a long Twitter thread like a while back, Maria, like how you came to the show's attention. I was like, oh, this person seems to really like Batman.
I was really curious, actually, about because when you guys reached out over email, I was like, man, I wonder how they found me, because I do have fingers in a lot of different pies and shit. So it's just like, well, I'm on the pop culture convention circuit quite a bit for work stuff. And so you just never know. Like, you meet people and things get passed on. But that's interesting. It was through that Twitter thread. That Twitter thread was like 2 years ago. And every now and again, people must search Batman Forever or search one of the words that's in that Twitter thread, because it's like 50 tweets or whatever. And it just gets resurfaced every now and again. People start retweeting from it. I'm like, man, this thread will not die.
I think I think we were in the midst of covering Batman Returns, and like just because we just have like all, you know, keywords of Batman are just out there on the Twitter all the time, and just much like Joel Schumacher, I just saw like, that'd be an interesting guest for the third movie. Just put that name in my Rolodex there, and here we are now, like all this time later. But
yeah, I think honestly, like 60% of my tweets were all about just how f***able Val Kilmer was as Batman.
The guy what he said his peak ability in this movie, which is It's kind of weird because like one of the things is like we had like throughout the whole show, like actually speaking of Dale Kingsmill, in the first movie, she was the one who brought the revelation to me that like I grew up under the conception that Jack Nicholson was regarded as like being a really sexy guy by people. And then she was like, "Oh God, no, he's hideous and stuff."
No.
And
After all these years of doing the show, I'm still laughing at you saying that.
But that's the thing at the time. I was like, "Yo, it's Jack Nicholson. Oh, he gets his end away everywhere. He's a very sexualized, sexy guy and stuff." And
He's a sexual guy.
And yeah,
It's the crazy dick scale, you know? Like, the crazier they are, the better the dick is, hypothetically. But I don't know if it's worth it in Jack Nicholson's case.
but in this movie, I was shocked to find out, though, like in the mid-90s, Chris O'Donnell was supposed to be where it's at. And I find him to be very, very vanilla and very bland. So I'm kind of taken aback by, like, this guy, really?
He's the hunk of the 90s. Come on.
But see,
He was that it boy. And again, like on that Matt Damon podcast, they were also talking about that because he was the other dude. It was like, it was Chris O'Donnell. It was all the people who were in School Ties. Brendan Fraser, Chris O'Donnell, Ed Norton, who wasn't, but like it was just sort of tangentially around Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. And like those 5-6 guys were up for everything. And O'Donnell was just getting everything. Like Scent of a Woman was kind of like, oh, he can act, but he's also hot. And you're like, can he?
My God.
Is he? I mean, he's hot. He's super hot. But like the acting thing is just, yeah, NCIS LA or whatever that show is that he's on now, that's great for him. That's wonderful for him. Like that's making use of all of his talents.
Yeah, he's never going to be your big heroic lead in a massive blockbuster movie, I don't think.
Yeah, and it's like, what's the equivalent, right? Like the Chris Nolan version of Robin is Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who's fucking amazing. But at the same time, it's like you don't actually have a whole lot of space or like a lot of stuff to do. And I really think Chris O'Donnell's good, like genuinely good in this movie. The Flying Grayson stuff, like I wrote some Flying Grayson's stuff into one of my novels just to see like, you know, who picks up on it, that kind of thing. And Chris O'Donnell, as his family die in this, like, you genuinely feel for him. And also the way he does his laundry. So it's like, I feel like he's got it down, you know, the emotion, the tragedy of his origin story, but also can he dry his laundry in a really hot and completely over the top way? If the answer is yes, then he can be a Robin.
Oh, in a hot way. Like, we covered that minute. The words hot never came up. Jordan, did you think that's a hot moment for him?
Oh, it's so sexual. Are you kidding me? People want to be wrung out, like the way he wrings that laundry. And so in that Twitter thread, there were so many people who were like, Chris O'Donnell and Batman Forever was my sexual awakening. The little earrings, the very Justin Theroux, like sleeveless singlets all the time. The way he uses his laundry, like even, you know, obviously Joel Schumacher, he's all about the butts and the phallic imagery. That's his whole brand. And, you know, who he is as a person, who he is as a filmmaker. But the, you know, considering how much Dick Grayson specifically on the page, on the comic book page, is known for his butt. Like he's very female gazy, which I love. And I loved how much it felt like that in the movie as well. Like he's really there to be cherished visually. And I respect it.
Yeah. And he appeals to, like, everybody. He appeals to women. He appeals to men. Like, everybody's into it.
Yes. Yeah, the split of people being like, he was my sexual awakening was like 70% men, 30% women, to be honest.
Back in the minute.
Yeah.
We haven't talked much about the minute because not a lot is actually going on.
Yeah, it's
a lot of staring. It's a lot of staring and breathing.
Yeah.
It is. But I do love how, like, from her reaction to the kiss, I can kind of instantly tell what's going on. Like, that's acting, people.
Yeah.
Like, she kind of knows that this is Batman now, I think. She's felt that kiss before. Who could forget those lips?
That's the thing, is like,
Yeah.
beating up those thugs at the circus didn't tip her off. Friggin' him outpouring all his emotions about seeing this giant bat didn't tip her off. The kiss has made her go, wait a minute.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's like it's a unique sensation, a unique feeling.
Yeah.
To be fair, I feel like it's less about the specifics and more about the feeling too. Like I'm sure she's probably not like, the way his lip arches here and it's just the right amount of lip balm and like just the right amount of pillowy bottom lip or whatever. I think it's more about like the way he feels and the way she feels when he kisses her is is what she's recognizing. And
the chemistry.
yeah, the chemistry, the heat, the unseen.
Yeah.
And I think that's the power of it.
I think it just reminded me, because I think it is like a little bit of a trope that you get in like comic book stuff. Like I know a couple of years after this, like the end scene of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man has like Mary Jane kissing Peter Parker in the cemetery, and then he turns her down for her own protection and whatnot. And as he's walking away, she has this like, wait a minute, and she touches her lips like, oh, that's the guy I kissed upside down in the alleyway and stuff.
Yeah, and I always thought that was sus, because I was like, that's a kiss you're not going to know. Like, A, Tobey Maguire, kisser. You know it. You just know it. Anyone who's that interested in poker and ruining people's lives is a kisser. But B, just the complete structure of the bodies was completely different. I don't feel like you would know. I always thought I was like, of all the factual errors in Spider-Man, I was like, the fact that she would recognize that kiss, calling bullshit on that.
Yeah, so like, well, she'd run over, like, Peter, would you mind, like, tipping yourself upside down and then running a load of water over your face? Because it was bucketing down when it happened, too. But I just want to check something dead quick here. But, of course, then Spider-Man also stole friggin' Jack Betts, the fisherman, during the box experiment. He's the guy who's like, Norman, you're out. So we're like, oh, freaking everybody's ripping off Batman Forever. We've discovered this throughout the whole show. It's like, that showed up in another movie. What the hell's going on?
Yeah, I genuinely believe Batman Forever is a good movie. Like, I know that's a controversial take, but I love what it does. Like, I love how fun it is. I love how silly it is. I love how much detail's loaded into every scene. Batman and Robin, I think, is genuinely bad. Like, it's not a good movie. But Batman Forever is the one that I will go back and revisit a lot of times. And like, I enjoyed it as a child. I was obsessed with it as a kid, but I've always stayed obsessed with it. Like, I think Val Kilmer is a really great A, Batman, but B, Bruce Wayne. Like, I always liked, I thought Michael Keaton was good as Batman and not very good as Bruce Wayne. He was always a little bit, what's the right word? Kind of Austin Powers-y. Like, he was just like a little bit goofy and a little bit dorky, and he wasn't really like suave and charming in the same way that Val Kilmer is, but not to the other end of the scale where he's like a fucking asshole, like Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne. So it's like a really fine line to walk. And obviously that's dictated by the time period as well. Like, 90s is an era of excess, and by the time you get to Chris Nolan's Batman, Bruce Wayne represents the 1%, right? So you have to like tweak and adjust and have the character reflect different things for that different decade. But that was always one of the things. Like, I thought the cast was great. I thought everyone was cast so well. And I just think it's a really good movie. Like, no dicking around, just really great.
Well, you touched on most of the Batmen there, but what about Clooney?
I'm not really into Clooney
No.
as Batman. Like, he seems like a great actor and very accomplished filmmaker and producer and whatnot, but I don't know why you would cast. I mean, I know why you would cast him.
He's the big guy at the time. That's it, isn't it?
Right.
That's the sole reason.
I kind of feel that way about Robert Pattinson's casting, to be honest. I sort of feel like that's a very like of the time casting. Like, he's like sort of. He's not like Twilight hot, like that was obviously like the peak level of like breaking into people's houses and flinging underwear. But there's a certain heat on him, like he's kind of that it boy, and that's honestly like one of my biggest concerns about the sort of Matt Reeves Batman is that I was worried by that casting because it felt more like going towards the heat score rather than the person that was necessarily like great for the part. But hey, who knows? He could be amazing, and I could be completely talking out my ass, which is highly likely.
I'm like 100% on board with Robert Pattinson because I just know from like, you know, keeping an eye on what he's been doing. It's like this guy, much like talking about Nicole Kidman, it's like since Twilight, he's done consistently interesting work. So it's like if he sees something in this, then him and Paul Dano, it's like, oh, this is like indie movie cred you got here. This is like proper actors you're getting in this movie. So it's like even Colin Farrell now. It's like so I'm 100% on board with Robert Pattinson. But like, you know, if he turns out to be atrocious, I'll come back and be like, oh, I'm sorry, Maria Lewis called it the whole time. But
no, like I mean, he's worked with like a lot of Aussies that we love, like David Mashard, obviously. In The Rover, and I think The Rover, maybe more than any other movie that he's done, that was the one that people were like, oh, oh, hang on, wait, is Robert Pattinson good? Question mark. Like, is he a
can
good
act.
actor? Question mark. Because he'd like sort of like dipped his toe in like a few little bits and bobs, but it was all Twilight movies, and then The Rover was like so different, and like, oh, Queen of the Desert, whatever, nobody saw it. No disrespect, but nobody saw it. Maps to the Stars, nobody saw it. Life, like, come on, fucking kill me. No more like James Dean shit. I'm so sick of it. But
Yes.
when he starts doing things like The King, right, which I think he's so fun and weird as the Dauphin in The King, which is again working with David Machad. The Lighthouse, stuff like that, very interesting, but I just don't know if he's right for the part. And also, just like a big part of that job is being able to do the press tour, and especially now, like not so much back then, it was like, you know, you do a fucking premiere and you do a junket and then that's it. Whereas now you have to do like a video with BuzzFeed and it's filmed, and then you do like a puppy interview where they release puppies, and you do the interview and do a premiere and you do a junket, then you do a touring junket, and then you do like the Asian press tour and all this kind of stuff. He's not super great on a press tour. He's not a super great interview subject. He doesn't necessarily do well with all that kind of side of it. And so I was very interested on a movie like this, because you're leaning hard into like the superstardom of it. You don't choose to be Batman unless you're like, well, I'm going to be a movie star now. And he's always seemed like someone who was very reluctant to be a movie star. So I'm intrigued to see how all that goes, shall we say.
I'd love it if they took the old school wrestling approach of just living the character, right? So he's going to be like an aloof Batman, let's say. Let's pretend that's the character. We don't know what his version of Batman is. He's the aloof Batman. So don't send him on any of the press tours. Keep him hidden. He's living the part.
I think Warner Brothers would be like, get the hell out of here with that, though.
Totally. But that might work better, though. Like, to be honest, so I've interviewed him 5 or 6 times, I think, over the years, for not just The Rover. The Rover was, like, really big in Australia because they're filming it here forever. And everyone's like, oh, my God, Edward Cullen's in the desert and shit. And Queen of the Desert, they filmed a bunch of that here as well. But specifically, like, I interviewed him for Twilight, Breaking Dawn Part 2, and what was the third one? Eclipse or some shit. They were all like moon metaphors. Yeah, you know what I mean. Twilight Before Sunset or something. I don't know. Whatever. But in Water for Elephants, they did a big Australian premiere, so I interviewed him for that too. And he's a very difficult interview and very hard to get, like, even just like complete sentences out of someone who just obviously doesn't enjoy the press side of things at all. Which, like, full respect, that's not for everyone. But it might be that kind of thing where you end up leaning on people like your Zoe Kravitz and your Colin Farrells or whatever.
Yeah.
And, you know, Zoe Kravitz is she's Andy Serkis. I mean, he's playing Alfred. Get him in there. He's such good crack. Like, you just base the whole press tour around Andy Serkis or any of the other people that are sort of like a little bit deeper in the cast, maybe.
Well, that's another thing you can do, actually, of course. Yet again, the old wrestling tactic. If someone's not a good talker, you put they give them a manager who's a talker. So you could just pair him up with someone who's better at the interview, and you're getting his face on the screen, but you're also getting the fun chat.
Yeah, so that's why they've started doing that on junkets now, sort of in the past 6 years, and 5 to 6 years. And so when you do see those junket interview slots, where it's like a weird collection of people, you're like, what? Why are they? And it's usually because one of those people is the weaker link, and they're teaming them up with someone, either one person or two, who are maybe like either get something good out of them or a little bit more press friendly to hope like to sort of carry the rest of the interview. It's very interesting. I'm always intrigued to see like who that dynamic is. Like, oh, we teamed Melissa McCarthy up with XYZ person, and you're like, oh, poor Melissa McCarthy's going to have to do all the work here.
Now, I'm going to be analysing that every time I see, because a lot of the time I see these interviews now, it is an interviewer with 2 of the stars.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to be analysing the pairing.
Yeah, and it's also a selling point.
They did one for, what was that movie that Drew Goddard made that was actually pretty good? It was like Night at the El Dorado or something. Like
Yeah.
And I remember...
Bad Times at the El Royale. I love that movie.
But, great movie. But I remember seeing in the press tour, they always had Dakota Johnson teamed up with, what do you call it, Kaylee Spani? And the two of them are just like, they're like, sure, they're lovely women to talk to, but they're both very weird interviews. Like,
Yeah.
And they spend the whole time just talking to each other. They barely acknowledge the interviewer and stuff. And it just seems like Dakota Johnson does seem to be like an odd sort. Like, she strikes me as the type as like, yeah, she's been thrust into the limelight. She probably doesn't want to be there and stuff, but I don't know her. So
it's also that double sell too of like, you're trying to, everything these days is about like, how are you selling this to your editor or the producer or whoever the person is who's like greenlighting where this interview runs. And so sometimes it's a case of like sweetening the pot. So Bad Times at the El Royale, like you have the superstar in that movie, the person you watch that movie and they like punch you right in the tit, they're so good, is Cynthia Erivo. But that's her first sort of theatrical movie you see her in. Widows isn't out yet. And so unless you're a massive Broadway stan or, you know, you're familiar with her work on West End, you don't know who that is. So they're like, okay, Cynthia Erivo, that's going to be a hard sell. But if we team her up with Chris Hemsworth, then from their perspective, they're like doubling the star power, but also likely to get that interview over the line if somebody's not as familiar with Cynthia's work.
I do kind of want, like, if you at any point get the job of interviewing Robert Pattinson for The Batman, though, Maria, I kind of want you to go in and go full Willem Dafoe on him now and just be sitting there and God. Look at ye, handsome lad with eyes bright like a lady. Come to this interview acting the Batman. You think you're tough, dude.
Last weird interview story I'll tell, but I did interview Willem Dafoe for this movie he did that is f***ing excellent, called The Hunter, and it was this Australian movie about this guy played by Willem Dafoe, who's a hunter, and he gets hired by this like big corporate sort of sci-fi type-esque company, right? And he's tasked with trying to hunt down the last Tasmanian tiger, which is an extinct species of animal, and allegedly in Australia, but there's always lots of sightings and shit. Anyway, he's in it along with Callan Mulvey, who's like a big Aussie Kiwi actor that we know down here for the show Heartbreak High, which is very popular, but he always pops up he's like in Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice or whatever the he's in Winter Soldier. He was in 300 Rise of an Empire. He's like just got a sick scar down his face. So he always gets cast and stuff where they just need like a scarry looking mean guy. Anyway, I was interviewing Willem Dafoe for this. It's a great movie and he's really good in it. He's always good in it. Sam Neill's in it too, like very briefly. But I was so nervous because Willem Dafoe's like a really scary looking motherfucker. And it was just the two of us inside this big town hall building in Brisbane, and there was nobody else there. Like, he didn't have a publicist there or anything. And it ended up being like an hour chat. And he was so f***ing sweet and so lovely and just genuinely like the nicest, sweetest, funniest, like very engaging. Every answer that he gave was like really good. He was not giving you press spin or anything like that. He was just like one of my favorite people, I think, that I've ever interviewed. He was so good.
Oh, nice. That's like, again, yeah, because he is such an intimidating presence. It's like, oh,
scary looking guy.
Yeah. Although talking about things that are scary, within the minute, we got a knock at the Wayne Manor door here. Good old Alfred, been very attentive, looks out and sees quite blatantly two full-grown adults in Halloween masks trick-or-treating. We
gotta have words with Alfred because what's he doing with the gates to Wayne Manor open? Yes, yeah. I know it's Halloween, Alfred, but set up out front. I know you have security guys or like a little security booth or something. He can go out there with his bowl of Mars bars or whatever and just like sit out the front handing out fucking Galaxy to whoever he wants. I just was like, this is such a lapse of security on his part. And then when he eventually gets that weird disease for like 45 minutes that he gets in the sequel, I was like, he deserves it. He's like genuinely the worst fucking Alfred. I was like, this is so stupid. I can't believe he's like, oh yay, children. A, they're adults, as you pointed out. And B, Clearly. What the f*** are they doing at the door? So bad. So bad. It was like such a bad move. And the point that leads them there as well is like them, is Bruce Wayne literally having bats on the brain.
Yeah.
You know, like they look inside his brain and it's just bats. I was like, oh my God.
That's the thing though as well. Like I just imagine, well, for one thing, Alfred, he's got like a weird swanky serving tray. Like when they come in, it's like, oh, he's got like a full-on silver tray with the candy.
What's he serving them? Negronis? Like, what the fuck? It's so wild. It's so wild.
Obviously,
Yeah.
Two-Face and Riddler are offended by the candy on offer because they just absolutely brain him and knock him out for the count.
I know. He's got a Giles rate of being knocked unconscious too. Like, the amount of times he's knocked unconscious as like an ongoing theme through all of these, you're just like, I mean, I know it's a stunty, right? Like it's
oh
not,
yeah, it's very blatantly like a guy in a grey wig that they got.
yeah, it's not Michael Gove taking those hits, but still, it's just like this poor guy, man. Like Pennyworth, he's concussed permanently. He's got serious brain damage.
We've brought up many times that Bruce is actually a villain, right? Because the way he's
100%.
treating this poor old man, he's making him look after this entire mansion. He makes him put up the Christmas decorations in the last one on his own. And now he's putting him in danger on a daily basis where he's constantly getting knocked on the head. He's like, let the man retire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're putting him in danger, though. Like, putting him in charge of trick-or-treaters. It's like, you don't know what kind of tricks they could pull on this poor old man.
Let him retire to, like, his cottage with his niece or whatever Alicia Silverstone's Batgirl is supposed to be. Barbara, right?
Yeah.
Is she his niece? Is that... No.
Yeah, I think that's... Yeah, something like that.
Great niece or something? I don't know. The family tree is stretched real thin. The branches are very, very, very weak and soft. But they're like, oh, it's my insert relative here. Something Barbara.
You just go along with it. Like, oh, okay, fine, whatever. Yeah, they're related, fine.
But that's the thing, though. Like, so Alfred, when he looks out, though, and he sees, like, oh, the two of them doing this little cutesy twick or tweet, which is... Like, I do love this movie, but minutes like that, I'm just like, oh, God, no, that's not
I
good
know.
enough.
You're just like, simmer down. Just a wee bit off the edge, you know?
But I am intrigued, though, by the choice of masks they've got going on, because there's two kind of devil masks, and they've got long noses, which is like, I think I could be like I know, John, you're like a Japanese culture enthusiast, so like brought Tengu to mind for me. Like,
I can see that. Yeah, totally.
And then also just the idea, long nose, and this is a deception, so is it like a Pinocchio nod? That kind of thing? Maybe.
Oh, like lying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or is it more just like, oh, we could put phallic symbolism on their face?
Yeah.
Which is also the Joel Schumacher go-to move.
Well, that was the other thing it really reminded me of, and I think could potentially be, like, maybe it is an actual nod, is that it really reminded me of in A Clockwork Orange. Like, Alex's mask has a big long nose and stuff, and he does full-on house invasions, which is what they're about to do. And then in Batman and Robin...
even the movements of Jim Carrey's Riddler is very Clockwork Orangey.
Yeah.
Like, just the way he physically moves is very similar to that character. So that's a really good pull.
Yeah, and of course, in Batman and Robin, the Droogs are just in the motorbike race with Alicia Silverstone and Chris O'Donnell. The Droogs are just there. There's full-on bowler hats, white boiler suits, all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, I wouldn't be surprised, though. Like, oh, yeah, like, remember in Clockwork Orange, like, Alex killed that woman with a giant penis. It's like, Alfred opens that door and a big dick just comes in and hits him on the goddamn head. And Joel Schumacher's just like, are you really surprised at this point with this movie? He's like, of course he knocks him out with a giant
that's on brand.
penis.
Yeah, I'd be disappointed if it wasn't that.
But yeah, and of course we got it's basically a bit of fourth wall breaking. Then when Jim Carrey waltzes in, looks directly down the camera, takes off the mask and goes, trick. And it's like, thanks for that, buddy.
We needed that, yeah.
It's like, we didn't get the joke there.
You definitely do need that.
And his plan is to seize and capture. But what are they talking about? Ooh, we're going to have to find out next minute.
Yeah. So, of course, then Alfred is dragged into what I'm assuming is a very nice cloakroom that Bruce Wayne has. You can see the friggin' hat boxes in there and everything. It's like, this guy, he's not worn any of those coats in like about 5 or 10 years.
Which is so frustrating because, like, you know how expensive each of those coats would have been. Like, you see the hat boxes and then you're like, oh, this rich son of a bitch. If you have the space and, like, the ability to keep your new fancy hats in the hat boxes, I hate you.
Yeah. Anyone who has multiple hat boxes, I really envy your life and hate you forever.
Yeah, Mrs. Maisel.
That's everything about Mrs. Maisel, though. It's just like the fact too that she has like a manager who's really down on the bottom rung of the economy as well, who's having to do all the work for her. It's like, who am I supposed to like in the show again? Like, I love the show, but it's like I'm kind of conflicted on whose side I'm supposed to be on here.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, like I think that's everything for this minute.
Yeah, it went longer than anticipated.
Yeah, should we wrap things up and go on into the next minute?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Let's do it. Let's do it. We'll do plugs next episode. We're going to mix it up this week. Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, crazy.
So just, crazy. Just come and speak to us on Facebook, Twitter, all that nonsense. And yes, join us again next minute for minute 93 of Bat Minute Forever.
Woo. Next time, a communications disruption can mean only one thing: invasion. A debonair millionaire and his date turn to flee, while his nemesis seeks a secret entrance and a sinister open sesame. Fisticuffs are flailed and goons flip off their feet, but will the Bat's below-ground base be finally breached? Find out Friday. Same Bat Pod, different Bat Minute.
Ba-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.